Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to be kind of all over the place, but in the emotional and spiritual classes. Our teacher's Becky Kiser, author of But God Can, How to Stop Striving and Live Purposefully and Abundantly, which publishes on May 7th. Becky is a speaker, podcast host, ministry leader, life coach, and a cheerleader of women. Yay! She is committed to helping women know, love, and follow God and His Word so that they can live freer and fuller lives. This was a great line when I read your media. Becky teaches at Christian women's events and prisons. I love that. And authors books and Bible studies. Becky and her husband Chris live in the Woodlands, Texas with their three daughters, Karis, Mariah, and Chandler. Welcome to class, Becky.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I have so much fun, as I was saying beforehand, that Frontgate reaching out and giving me so many opportunities to kind of seed in folks that I hadn't heard of, that I didn't know of you, and then getting to go look into you was so much fun. You have some other Bible studies and some things going on, and you just look like a fun person. All the good stuff on your website. So I definitely want everybody to pay attention to that in the show notes and go over and check out what a blast it looks like you are indeed embracing that freer, fuller life.
Yeah.
So what I do at Old School is I talk about the healing journeys, the health journeys, how we get there, and how we hang on to that and maintain that in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that's just right up the alley of But God Can.
Sure.
So what I ask folks to do initially is to give me their story. Not necessarily your testimony and salvation, although that's fine too. Just kind of the story as the wind up to how your journey got you here.
hmm Yeah. I mean, like a super softball question you gave me for the very first one. um, my story, as all of our stories are so multifaceted with all the ups and downs and all arounds. And um, where I'm trying to think like where best to pick up. And I would say probably in adulthood. So we'll skip to adulthood. Having been raised in a home. My parents divorced when I was a baby and was raised both very like Mother Earth hippie in one household and very like Christian liturgical in another. So I had these strong dichotomies that I was raised within, became a Christian at 16 on my own. And then, but as I got older, the but God can part of my story came into, like, as you get older, you start to carry so many more insecurities. You have just more awareness. Like, as that teenager, I can do anything, nothing will affect me. I'm good. I'm actually the best. As
You're
those things
immortal.
start, right, as those things start to wear off and life experiences start happening, not where it was no longer the life experiences that happened to me, but it was the life experiences I was in and living. And that's when I really started to wrestle with my faith of, man, I don't have what it takes. I'm not enough for this, or I've messed things up too much, or I've gone too far. I've not gone far enough, or like all those things that started to happen in my life. And as I leaned into God and as I leaned into the Father and His Word, and just started to see what crazy, wild things God had already done. Right. Like when we look at scripture and we see a God who had taken people who had been in slavery for hundreds of years, then led them up to an insurmountable thing like an entire ocean with enemies coming after them, and then he parts it. That's miraculous. But I hadn't experienced a miracle like that. Or when we look at someone like Lazarus, who had been dead and had been one of Jesus's best friends, and then his sisters felt betrayed by Jesus, and then God raises him from the dead. Those were miracles I knew were true of God, but had not yet experienced in my own life. And so several years ago, I felt like the Lord was just like, trust me with this in your life. Like, I am the same God today as I was then. In fact, I have even greater things for you, which is what Jesus tells us in his word. Like, he says, you will do greater things than me. Like, I'm sending you a helper so you're not alone, but you will do greater things than me. And so then when we approach life that has marriage that is hard, I've been married to Chris for 17 years, and We have not just had one of those like Hallmark movie romances, right? We fight more on more days than we get
Who does?
along, right?
It's a
Nobody does, but
lie.
that's what we think is true, right? And so I wanted to, as I wrestled through, okay, what does real parenting look like? What does real marriage look like? What is real like identity struggles and being multi-passionate person? I wanted I wanted to share with others the truth God had given me, that we can hold our lives, all the things that we're carrying, whether it's diagnoses, failed relationships, church hurt, whatever it may be, we can hold those things up to God and his truth can be enough. Where you are all about the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, a lot of times that world, even the Christian realm of that, is so self-helpy that it leaves us super motivated for about 5 minutes, right? But the moment we hear a discouraging word, the moment we feel at something, the moment our body aches, it falls flat. And that's where I have found in God's word, like, listen, on my own, I can't, but God can. And when I stopped trying to pump myself up enough to believe that I could do anything, and I acknowledge actually the gospel message is that on our own we can't, but that's where God comes into the picture and shows us that he is capable of doing absolutely anything in our lives.
Awesome. So, okay, like our lives as a whole are a
Yeah.
but God can moment, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. I mean, every bit of it, like you were talking,
Right.
the idyllic marriages that were, I mean, it's not that it can't be, it's not that God didn't design it so that it could be, but
Right.
we are living in a world with other free moral agents and, it's just, by myself, I live with my daughter, but on
Mhm.
my own. People try to tell me to stop saying I'm alone, but that I'm just by myself right now.
Yeah.
But even getting me to make a decision.
Right.
So when you've got other humans in the mix, but I have to believe, even from what I have read in your book, that there were some very specific but God can moments that kind of
Mhm.
brought you to the point where now you're going to write about it.
You're wanting to hear some stories? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I'd like the ones that maybe are like the impetus. Yeah. That
Yeah.
brought you across the line that said, the Lord's been tapping you to do that.
Yeah.
But what made the difference? What
This
got you there?
difference. Yeah. I'm trying to think of some recent ones and trying to think of even ones that maybe aren't in the book. So it's a story that everyone can hear for the first time. A more recent but God can experience that I really had was experiencing some relational hurt of just friendships that I'd felt very, very betrayed in, not
Mm,
sure how I was going to handle it, and it not going good. Right. Like, even when you handle and do the right things, like you follow the biblical process of you go to the person directly. And then if you can't, you bring in one other, you're not gossiping with everybody about it. You're not fabricating things, and it didn't go good. And in that, there was a stretch of this was several years ago, but there was this stretch of just feeling really alone and isolated. And in our world today, that can be a real struggle, to feel alone and isolated when, well, we have all these friends on Facebook, or we have all these friends on Instagram, or we even have all these friends in our everyday life, but yet we could still feel surrounded and completely isolated. Do you know what I'm talking about? And that's
absolutely. I
yeah.
do.
And that's where I found myself of like, and then, like my mental head would be like, oh, Becky, you're never like what you talked about earlier, like you're never alone. God is with you. And it's like, well, it doesn't feel very with me right now, like, and I referenced the story of Mary and Martha earlier of like when Mary and Martha went up to Jesus and just said, where were you? Like, if you'd only been here. And I think I felt that way with God of like, I'm surrounded and I've never felt more lonely in my entire life. And so in that was just leaning into God and trusting God, being willing to acknowledge my hurt, as opposed to a lot of times, especially in church or Christian cultures, we think we're dealing with our hurt by suppressing it, right? If we just push it down far enough to not feel it, then it doesn't exist. We've forgiven, quote unquote, forgiven them and moved on. And it was me dealing with my hurt, acknowledging my hurt, putting up healthy boundaries. And then now I am in a season currently of just fruitful, good depth of friendships with both people who are like my people, super close. They know the good, the bad, and the ugly. I have people I could call my best, my worst days. And then I've also built a network of friends, not a network sounds like too businessy, but like a
I
group of
understand.
friends too who are still my people, who I see regularly and consistently, but maybe they're not my inner, they know the deep, dirty parts of my life because it's not for everybody. Um, and God's brought this community and this relationships in his timing was a bit longer than I would have preferred, per usual with the Lord. But that's where it's like on my own, I wanted to fix things. I wanted an apology from those people. I wanted vindication. I wanted them to acknowledge what was actually true or what wasn't true, and not just be the only one trying to own my side of it. On my own, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to fix it and make it right. But God dealt with my heart. He's going to deal with other people in his own time and way. That's none of my business. And then he brought about this community that was even more fulfilling than what I had before. So that's an example that I don't think I shared the details or the vagueness of it in my book at all, but that would be a pretty recent one.
Well, and I think it's so fascinating because each of the little points you were talking about, okay, I said I was 61. When I went through my divorce, and I kept using the word alone, and people are like, look, words matter. You're not alone. And I go, I
Yeah.
get it. I'm by myself, not alone. Let's use the words then. But there is, and I love that the Lord is the only one, because
Yeah.
my story has a lot of abuse and a lot of people who were supposed to love me and all of these things, and
Yeah.
how my journey walks out. We all have our story.
Mhm.
And but anyway, it was just that I was feeling there weren't people with skin on right here
Yeah.
for me.
Yes.
And that's a very big thing for your physical, mental, and emotional health, that you get a hug periodically. I tease my daughter,
Yeah.
she's 23 and she doesn't necessarily want to hang out with me, but I'm like, okay, I need a hug, and it needs to be at least for 10 seconds or I'm,
Yes.
I'm going to wither. And so she laughs.
Yes.
But the Lord and I have dispensed with subtlety. When I had, through COVID, I had a bunch of relationship situations seem like bizarre. I was like, why is that person falling away? Why is this happening? And it was as he was pushing me along, because he had tapped me years ago to write this book, and now we were moving along. And I was on my face before him a lot more during the divorce. So I said to him, I go, my discernment has gotten a beating. Can we dispense with subtlety? And who's supposed to be here? You throw that door open, not even a knob. It's just welcome in. And those that aren't, put flaming seraphim in front of that door. So I'm just not dumb enough to keep hanging on to what's not, even if it means nobody's coming in or out of either door.
Right.
If he needs me to be, by myself, just with him, then I was okay with that. And it was so much more peace giving. And I even heard these two people on a podcast talking about how sometimes the people who've been around you and who've enjoyed trampling on your boundaries and who you are just don't like it that you're pressing in to Jesus, and you are moving in a different direction and maybe kind of holding to those boundaries. So we have to be okay with them maybe not having a say in it anymore, or if they have to go. I mean, and I get the whole, there's a churchy and secular people say people were there for a reason, a season, or whatever. Yeah, I get that. I get that.
Leave
okay,
your
we're just
bumper
done.
stickers to yourself.
We're done now.
Yes. Let me show you a door. You can go this way.
We have like the dating game, door number one. So yes, I absolutely love that. I think that is, and I think that's hard. You're right, in Christian communities, because sometimes what people will expect of us is to forgive without any, and we are supposed to forgive without even them asking or without anything, but to do that without having the acknowledgement for ourselves that that we have to, that battle isn't ours. How
Yeah.
they are going to be reconciled to it is going to be something that God needs to do. And that we can hang on to. And people
Yeah.
can get a little judgy about
Mhm.
us. I have people who know I have forgiven my ex-husband. There was infidelity, but I have people, well-meaning Christians, I believe, think that I'm horrible because I'm not like pals with him and the woman he
Wow.
married who was infidelitous with, and that we don't all hang out for the sake of my daughter. Well, my daughter would be mortified. She doesn't want anything like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what's not fair is I forgave him and we're done. And our
Mhm.
marriage wasn't perfect and I wasn't perfect in it. I own my part to play,
Yes.
but they're just not nice people. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
if I
Yeah.
met a guy out there in the dating world where I am now and they did that to his
Yeah.
ex-wife, I just wouldn't want to hang out with
You're not
you.
for
I'm like,
me.
you know what?
Mhm.
That's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where Christians, we struggle so much with all the shoulds, right? All the things we feel like we should be doing, and we've put these so much like the Israelites back in the day of we add all these extra things to things God never said. And yes, forgive your husband, but I share a story in the book actually about I had experienced some trauma as a kid, and I had a counselor who was like, "We need to work on forgiveness for this." And I was like, "Nope, no thanks. Don't want to. They don't deserve it." And finally, I was open enough to it. And she taught me so much, Michelle, about forgiveness of because I thought as a Christian, like I forgive and then we can live peacefully amongst one another and everything's going to be fine. And what she taught me was forgiveness is about taking that weight that you're carrying and then sending it on its way. And it's more releasing yourself. You're not releasing the other person from the wrong that they did. But the forgiveness aspect, still even hearing and knowing that, it's still, I remember the first time I really like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to really work on this. And I remember I can still like feel the corduroy couch at my house right now, just trying to walk through this moment of, okay, God, I forgive X for this. And then tears, I'm not even a crier, but like tears just immediately spring everywhere. And I was like, no, and like physically nauseous, like, no, I'm not forgiving that. I can't. And I remember like as I really walked through this journey, that those first few days, it was like every 2 minutes, I forgive them, I release it, and then 2 minutes later, just feeling the bitterness and the anger even more than I had before for it. And then it would be like, okay, every month this is like coming up, and then now it's like I could go 3 even now talking about it, I'm not gonna feel like nauseous anymore, and it's not that I'm free of it, it still sucks, it still hurts, but I also will never enter into relationship with that person because it's not for me to. And that's where Christians, we don't understand forgiveness and healthy boundaries can coexist. And
Absolutely.
you can still forgive and release your ex-husband, your daughter's father from what happened, but you don't need to trust him again, nor should you. That's not wise.
And I don't wish them ill will.
For sure.
I have actually prayed for him and my daughter so that their relationship stays
Yes.
sound, which is huge because right as the divorce was happening, if I had heard one more God fearing woman tell me I needed to pray for him, I was almost cursing. I was like, no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no. Telling him to get out was enough for me. I don't
Yeah.
make me sit here and like, and I get it. We can't pray for somebody and hate on them or whatever. I'm not a hateful person. That isn't my
No, but
way.
you were hurt. And
Yeah.
that goes back to the shoulds of people putting on you what wasn't for you at that moment, where what they needed was for them to just you come sit on the couch and just cry with you. And then if they felt like your ex needed to be prayed for, which sure, he clearly did, well, then they go home and they pray for him until you have the strength on your own to get there.
Yeah.
And that's where it's just like, I think part of it is we don't know what we don't know. And at the same time, we, especially as women, stay gullible or stay ignorant because we are too afraid to push against what's always been expected of us.
understood scripture. I had been a women's ministry leader,
Yeah.
taught Bible studies, and where it talks about how so much forgiveness we've received.
Mhm.
So I have doled out that forgiveness. And I literally, the day I told him he needed to leave, I looked right at him at that day and said, I forgive you because I can't carry that. Not because he ever
Yeah.
asked for it, not because he's
Right.
ever asked for it. And
Right.
that is the true crux of forgiveness, is
Yeah.
about our relationship with the Lord. All he asks is that you
Mhm.
forgive as you've been forgiven. What
Right.
comes there? And I know the Bible talks a little bit about reconciliation in the sense that that person, I believe, in all those situations, does need to come and say, I wronged you or whatever. But doesn't mean we go camping together. It doesn't mean we celebrate holidays together.
Right.
But I'm not holding my breath about that kind of thing either. I know
Right.
what I had to do for my relationship, and what was really awesome in the whole mix was my daughter coming to me and saying, I really, really, Mom, wanted you to be madder than you are.
Mm.
And I am so grateful for the example you have been. And I was like,
Wow.
because I didn't think I had been. I was not, at the end of my marriage, I was not a biblical portrait of a wife.
Yeah.
We had gone through 8 rounds of counseling, and
Oh,
this infidelity with the same person kept up. And so I just wasn't in a space where I thought I was showing my daughter, in my opinion, how not to let yourself be treated.
mm.
Just because the counselors, and there were secular and Christian, kept saying, you need to keep trying, you need to stand there, look at him, he's trying so
Yeah.
hard. But anyway,
Yeah.
so there's a whole rabbit hole there, but I love
Yeah.
it. I love that your story, because I think ultimately most of the but God can situations, to me, are relational. They are so
Right.
much about some relationship, and
Mhm.
not necessarily all bad ones. Like
Right.
even the joyful things, we can see how he did some of the things you were saying for the Israelites, how we get those promises and get that
Yeah.
power, even if we're not, the Jewish nation.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Those are promises we get to talk about too.
Yeah.
So that is so awesome. And I love having walked through, like I said, the letter at the beginning of the book. I love that. It gives a lovely picture of how we can best um, walk through this process. I think
Mhm.
so many times we get a Bible study or we get a book,
Mhm.
and what do we do with this information? We've
Right.
read it. It's like you were saying, somebody can read a self-help book and 5 minutes later, or you go to a retreat
Yeah.
and you're like
Yeah.
on fire when you come back, whether it's secular or Christian,
Right.
and you're so excited and you're going to change your whole life.
And
Eh.
then nothing happens. Yes. Yes. It's important. I wanted the book to feel very much like, so I'm a Bible teacher, but also a life coach. And I wanted it to feel practical and applicable. So
There you go. You made a new
practical is like,
word.
I just made a word. Check that out, Merriam-Webster. I wanted a practicable book that could, that that was interactive, so that they would feel, so that every person that picks it up isn't just reading ideas, but then there's questions and activities all throughout the chapters, and then at the very end of the chapter, more questions to process and a challenge every time. Is I wanted it to be an experience, because when you taste, touch, feel things, that's when life changes, that's when it sticks. And so it was important that we experience each of these things and really process through it and choose it, and not just in one ear out the other. um that was important to me, that that would be available.
I feel you accomplished that. And I feel like it was kind of funny because as I read a couple of the questions that you had, I think you called some of them tips, but then some of the things that you were getting us lined up.
Yeah.
Um, I have to say, and I know you expected it, and I know in the words you said that, I bristled a little. I was like, okay, she wants me to sign down here that I'm going to finish reading this. And it's like, I have mountains of books. I try for
Yes.
every single guest of mine to read at least a piece of their book
Yes.
before they come
Yeah.
on, because some of them
Yeah.
agree. so much quicker, and your in front
Yeah.
gate came up so fast. I was like, I
Yeah.
don't have time to read that. Plus, I'm a
Yeah.
bookkeeper and it's tax season, whatever.
Yes.
So anyway, it was pretty funny. I was like, but okay, what do I want? Do I want a really cool rah-rah book that's
Yeah.
ineffective after I'm done with it? Or
Yeah.
do I want something where I have to put some skin in the game? And
Yeah.
so that actually led me to the question, and I apologize if it is somewhere farther into the book, it could
You're
be,
good.
but from your website, I saw you had some interactive stuff. Is there
Yeah.
going to be a like a Facebook community or an online community for some of this like accountability
Processing.
to each other?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Well, one, I'm super glad that you felt uncomfortable even just reading the intro letter and the intro to the book. That makes me like deliriously happy to hear because that was intentional of I mean, I hope even from this conversation, like what you laughed about at the beginning as you were reading the intro, like I want to be a cheerleader for women. Like I want to be everyone's biggest fan. And I love seeing what other women can't see in themselves and pushing them to that. But I also know you don't get there unless you get uncomfortable, right? Like
Mm.
you don't get there unless you have a real friend that's like not afraid to hurt your feelings a little bit or push you where you're not willing to go. And our life can't change if we don't get uncomfortable a little bit. So I love that you felt uncomfortable even in the intro letter. There's much more to come. Um, but yes, there is, especially for those who pre-order, I'm doing like a Zoom book club with everyone who's pre-ordered. So
Oh, how
then
fun. My writing coach just did that. She's releasing a
really,
book, and she just 3 weeks in a row, we're going to do Zoom book club. Oh, that's so
I love
fun.
that so much. Yeah. So I felt like this book, because it's dealing with some hard things, that's one of the things we're doing. So anyone who pre-orders, we're collecting all the emails, and then it will be a live Zoom based group where every week I come on and we're just going to go chapter by chapter together. But then they have a resource and training. If they want to then host a group at the same time or later, then they have felt like they have the tools and equipping to do so. But more than anything, they've been coached through it. And so those conversations will be recorded also and available, and we'll have I have a private Facebook group that everyone has access to. So on my website, beckykaiser.com/butgodcan, links to everything to be able to access that. Yeah.
Awesome. I have all those connections. They sent like a dozen connections over with your
Okay.
kit. So I'm like, okay, cool.
Cool.
Because sometimes I get folks who this author process is so
Huh.
bizarre. I
Yes.
mean, the Lord asked me a long time ago to get started, and I thought it was going to just be for me. And then I got into Compel writing groups. I don't know if you're familiar with those. And I
Yeah.
got to learn some more. And then I got writing coaches, and they told me I needed a podcast, and they told me I need to speak, and all this stuff. Well, you don't understand like platform building and
Yeah.
or even launching the difference between traditional and self-publish, all this
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So this is so much fun. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll get somebody who barely has an Instagram, let alone a whole website.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then I'm a bookkeeper, bean counter, type A personality. So if people
Yeah.
start telling me I need to do stuff, I'm
Yeah.
all over it. I have
Yeah.
like
You're
my
like, I
fingers are
can
everywhere.
dominate any checklist. Watch me roll.
I'll even put stuff on there that I already did just so I can say,
Yes.
okay.
My husband's the same way. We have like a joint note app that's like all of our household to-dos where it's like our joint list, his list, my list, so we can add things. And for sure, things like he'll keep all the things that have been checked, he'll keep his on his list just so he can like feel the accomplishment. And I'm like purging. If we've checked it and it's on my list or our joint list, it gets deleted immediately.
It's like folding towels. I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of cleaning or laundry or
Yeah.
whatever chores, but folding towels is the one thing I can relate to. I'm a very even person. I did scrapbooking when my daughter was little, and everything had to be 12 by 12 or 10 by 10. It had to all be even. So you
Yes.
can fold a towel into a lovely thing and you see that the towels were done.
Yes.
Every other part of laundry gets put somewhere and you don't see anything at the end of the day that you accomplished. So for me, the checklist is I'm like your husband, that makes me so happy.
That is hilarious.
I don't even
Yeah,
care if anybody
I
else sees
saw an
it.
Instagram reel the other day. I think my husband sent it to me that was kind of about the folding towels. This is like total rabbit trail, but it's funny and goes along with it. And it was like, if you really want to impress your wife, take take a laundry basket and take towels that are already folded and clean in the like laundry room. And if your wife's been gone for a few hours, right before she gets home, unfold them, throw them in the thing, and be folding towels when she walks in and be like, just doing a quick load for you.
I love that. That is awesome. I love that one along with, I don't know if you've seen on social media, they talk about how men have such a hard time when they get ready to go out to dinner with their wife. It's like this
Uh-uh.
back and forth and nobody can make up their mind. So they taught, this one guy gets on there and he teaches men to do this. He goes, your wife gets in the car and he goes, guess where we're going tonight?
Yes, I have seen this. Genius.
And she
Genius.
says the restaurant, he goes, yes, how did you know? And I'm like, that is awesome. And I heard a bunch of women complaining, thinking that it was manipulation. I'm like, I don't give a crap.
Yeah,
I think that's
manipulate me.
awesome.
We
don't
ended up at the
care.
place I wanted to go. There was no fights, no disappointments. This actually is genius.
It's genius.
I love it.
Well, that's so awesome. Well, I love every bit about this. I am going to eventually read through everything.
Yes.
But
In your
I'm
own
going to
time.
do the pre-order because I would love to be a part of the Zoom. I had so much fun with my writing coaches. And
Yeah.
so I think this will be fun. I'll make sure all those connections go out. I've talked with Frontgate. I know when your release is, so we will get this out. I'll have to push up the date, but that's okay. The last thing I typically ask everybody on my podcast is for this nugget. The one thing that you wish that you had either discovered or someone had told you sooner.
Ooh. The one thing I wish I would have known or discovered sooner.
And it doesn't have to be religious either or Christian or what have you.
Anything.
Yeah. One of my authors that came on, and she is a Christian author, she said, I wish I understood compound interest because she's divorced and she wished she
understood that. That makes sense. Yeah. I'll do a silly one, and if I can think of a serious one for after a follow-up, I'll throw that one in too. My silly one is I have teenage girls, and so right now all the rage is skincare, and that's just like what they're obsessed by. I wish I would have washed my face more and not just slept in my makeup. I still sleep in my makeup, and I'm lucky to like use a face wipe right before I fall asleep. And my children are appalled at me and like, Mom, this is why you look the way you look, which is always so encouraging.
You're
and
fabulous.
rude and not true. But that's teenage daughters. That's just how it is. So I wish I would have known, like, wash your face at night if you have makeup on, especially. Maybe do some lotion and wear sunscreen, and don't put tanning oil on your face when you're a teenager. So that would have been like a basic life lesson one. An actual life lesson that's more like spiritual. And one of the things that I am just talking a lot about right now with women is I wish I would have known less of the shoulds, or I wish I would have not believed them. And the one specifically I'm thinking about is like with time with the Lord. Michele, I thought like you're only a good Christian if you spend time with the Lord every morning for at least 30 minutes to an hour, preferably with a cup of coffee steaming and maybe the sun rising in the background.
Oh.
Right? And that it also included prayer journaling, reading scripture, applying it, and then going and I don't know, like getting eggs from your chicken hut that morning. I don't know, but I thought it was supposed to be a certain way. And so I always felt I loved God and I've always loved his word, but I always felt so much shame when I would go 3 days without spending time with the Lord, or when I'd go 3 weeks without spending time with the Lord. And that shame would keep me from going back to him. And now I've just experienced so much freedom that, man, connecting with God is about connecting with God. And some days that means I sit down for an hour and read his word because I can't get enough of it. And other weeks, that means as I'm running the carpool lines, I'm praying, or as I'm like walking the dog and scooping up its poop on the walk, that's reminding me, like, deal with your own stuff too, Becky. And what do you need to like pick up and toss out too? Like, I wish I would have known that there's so much more freedom in our relationship with Christ instead of feeling so confined by what I thought I should do.
And I've heard people use the phrase, quit letting people shit on you.
Yeah. Yes, that's what my counselor tells me. You have really shitty thinking. I'm like, thanks. You too.
Well, that's awesome. You are delightful, and you look fabulous. So, I mean,
Thank
yes,
you.
you should wash your face.
Thank you.
When I was a kid, I joke that I do so much now for my skincare and for my health.
Yeah.
But when I was in high school, my mom didn't tell me to. I washed my face with the Irish Spring soap that was in the shower.
Right. Or if you were like real cool, you had the Noxzema.
Yes,
like that was
I did. By the time I got to college, Noxzema came along, which stinks and is disgusting. All of this is just disgusting. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. And I used to spray baby oil on myself when I lived in Hawaii in my 20s.
Yeah, we didn't put sunscreen on. We took actual baby oil and lathered our skin on it until we had a second-degree burn. That's what you do.
Till we were caramelized.
Yes. Don't do that. Anyone listening, no matter what your age is.
Try and say better things now.
Do something different.
Well, this has been delightful, hon. And I can't wait for this to release, and I will get everything to you. And I want to thank everybody for coming to class today. I hope if you're enjoying what you're seeing here and hearing here, that you'll go over to all the platforms and rate and review. If you want to comment, if you want to chime in, love that even more, because I'd like for what's happening here to be searchable. And I want to keep providing this type of quality, fun, just conversation about each other's stories. If you want to connect with Becky, I'll have all of her information in the show notes, and when I do promotions, so that you can get over there and pre-order and be a part of the Zoom club. That would be just really, I think you'll just be so ultimately blessed for this. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you all for coming to class today, and class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel is brought to you by Brush with Greatness, a Hawaiian artist studio.